Coming up on Philosophy Talk,
There are a lot of bad Republicans. There are no good Democrats.
the psychology of partisan politics.
Are you a tax-raising, latte-sipping, Prius-driving, New York Times-reading, corporation-hating liberal?
Demonic how the liberal mob is endangering America.
Losing our religion. The liberal media's attack on Christianity.
Control freaks. 7 ways liberals plan to ruin your life.
Or are you a gun-toting, Bible-thumping, climate change-denying, Walmart-shopping, homophobic, immigrant-hating conservative?
The Republicans lie. They want to see you dead. They'd rather make money off your dead corpse.
Do the minds of conservatives really differ from the minds of liberals?
Our guest is Jonathan Haidt, author of The Righteous Mind, Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion.
The psychology of partisan politics, coming up on Philosophy Talk. Welcome to Philosophy Talk, the program that questions everything.
Except your intelligence. I'm John Perry.
And I'm Ken Taylor. We're here at the studios of KALW San Francisco.
Continuing conversations that begin at Philosopher's Corner at Stanford, where Ken and I are professors of philosophy.
Today, we're asking about the psychology of partisan politics.
Well, just start with God, guns, and sex. Some Americans view gun ownership as a non-negotiable sacred right, and they view homosexuality as an unholy abomination. Other Americans see guns as one of our great social ills, and they see differences in sexual orientation as no more significant than differences in eye color.
Well, John, those are bound to be emotionally charged issues, but, Americans are also deeply divided over things like the environment, the economy, and even education. We all say we want clean air and water, good schools, and a thriving economy, but we don't agree at all about how to achieve those things.
Well, it's amazing how Americans can fight over things that you might think would cause very little division. We're like warring tribes that just refuse to get along and let old wounds heal.
One of my favorite cases in point on that score is healthcare. Look, every advanced industrialized democracy has had some form of universal healthcare for a very long time. It's such a struggle in this country, mainly because those who oppose it keep saying it's something like Stalinism, where we're going to become Stalinist.
It sounds a little to me like you're blaming the Republicans here, Ken.
Well, I mean, come on. Calling people who support universal health care Stalinists? That's totally out of bounds, don't you think?
Well, tell me what the real issue in health care is.
It's pretty straightforward, John. Should we guarantee everybody equal access to basic health care independently of ability to pay? The answer is obvious. It's about simple fairness and common decency. I really have a hard time seeing how any reasonable person could deny that.
Well, that's because you're thinking that fairness means treating everyone the same, treating everyone equally, at least as far as basic rights and basic goods are concerned. That notion of fairness warms the hearts of left-leaning, latte-drinking liberal do-gooders like yourself. But the blame game starts when you turn around and use fairness as a weapon against what you think of as mean-spirited, greedy conservatives.
I think you're making my point for me, right? You're implying that conservatives have some kind of deep aversion to arguments based on fairness. I definitely buy that.
No, that's not what I'm saying at all. Just the opposite. Conservatives like fairness, too, just like you do. It's just that they think about fairness differently from liberals like you.
Oh, yeah, right, John. For fairness for them is when you get yours, I got mine, and we together screw everybody else. Some notion of fairness.
No, it's not right. Conservatives think of fairness as everybody getting what they deserve. No more, no less. Things are fair when everybody pays their fair share. Nobody freeloads. Hardworking, talented people get to reap the fruits of their talents and hard work.
Look, John, I'm willing to grant you that there are different notions of fairness, maybe different philosophical notions of fairness. And yeah, reasonable people can disagree over which notion of fairness to apply in which situations. But, why can't we have calm and reasoned political debate about just that issue? Like which notion of fairness is right for these times? That's what we would do in a philosophical seminar on this topic.
Well, Ken, politics ain't beanbag, and it ain't philosophy either.
I have to admit, I wish it was. I mean, a more reasoned and, more philosophical politics. That was Plato's dream, and I share Plato's dream. It's my dream, too.
Yeah, and it's definitely a dream. There is just a big difference between philosophy and politics. In the philosophy seminar room, the only things really at stake are ideas. No money is changing hand. No goods are being redistributed. The social fabric of everyday life isn't being stretched and torn. In that context, of course, people can afford the luxury of dispassionate debate and argument. Real life isn't like that.
So, John, that thing you were saying a minute ago about liberals and conservatives having different philosophical ideas about fairness, was that just empty talk? I mean, it sounds like you're saying that we pretend to care about fairness, but we just do so as a way of papering over and disguising our real motives and interests when people push us and force us to defend ourselves. But it's all just a pretense or something.
Yeah, I hate to break it to you, Ken, but the role of reason in politics is much different than the role it plays in philosophy. In politics, reason is there to add a veneer of rationality to memos that have already been drafted by prejudice and emotion. That's why we need to delve into the dark reaches of the human psyche if we really want to understand how partisan politics works.
I don't want to believe that, John. I really don't. But, part of me fears that you just might be right.
Well, to help us probe the psychology of partisan politics, we sent our roving philosophical reporter, Caitlin Esch, to a place where political vituperation is alive and kicking, the blogosphere.
That's where conservatives regularly write scathing screeds against liberals, and liberals righteously rant against conservatives. Caitlin files this report.
I learned a lot from the internet this week, like the terms bedwetting liberal and T-Billy, Obama bot, and libtard. A limousine liberal is an upper-class lefty, a hypocrite who, for example, claims to be environmentally conscious while flying all over the world. A repugnation is a Republican politician. So I asked 3 political bloggers how they think the other side sees them.
Oh, well, that we hate capitalism, right? We hate America. We blame America first.
They think that we really do hate poor people. To which I say, Obama's created 47 million poor people who hate poor people. I mean, he loves them. He keeps making more.
I think they see the average conservative as bigoted, racist, sexist, hateful, kind of like a Nazi.
We heard John Hawkins of rightwingnews.com in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Before that, Leah Sargent of Misfit Politics in Virginia, and John Amato of the blog Crooks and Liars in Los Angeles. Sargent and Hawkins are conservative. John Hawkins.
I distinguish between liberals and liberalism. I see liberalism as evil. I absolutely do. I would like to see liberalism in the United States to become as reviled as Nazism. But I don't see liberals as evil. I have friends who are liberal. In fact, one of my best friends is a liberal.
I'll just be honest with you. I absolutely will not date a liberal.
Last year, Leah Sargent wrote an article called Top 10 Reasons I Will Never Date a Liberal.
First of all, hipsters not my thing. Potheads are not my thing. And guys who don't shower are not my thing.
At the opposite end of the spectrum is John Amato of the Crooks and Liars blog. He's a self-described progressive.
I was eating dinner at my niece's house, and one of her husband's friends goes, "Oh, I hear you're a bleeding heart liberal." And he starts laughing. And, I never met the person before. That's like, if you're going to introduce yourself, that's kind of a derogatory thing to say to a liberal.
So what do these 3 have in common? Not very much, except maybe that they don't really get along with the other side. Where do they differ? On just about everything. Amato is very concerned about global warming and the impact of Citizens United.
The Republicans want to make sure that they protect the privileged, the elite, at the expense of the middle class or working class and lower classes. And that hasn't changed all this time from the French Revolution up until this last election.
The conservative bloggers both listed gun control, big government, and abortion as concerns. Here's Leah Sargent.
They think it's totally okay to abort a child who's never done anything wrong, but they don't want the death penalty for people that we know are terrorists. Honestly, I think liberals probably would have given Osama bin Laden a fair trial.
So where does that leave us? Will liberals and conservatives ever find common ground? I'll give the last word to conservative blogger John Hawkins.
No, nobody's going to get along. It's not something where people can get along. The differences are so great, somebody's got to be defeated.
For Philosophy Talk, I'm Caitlin Esch.
Thanks, Caitlin, for that kind of depressing glimpse of politics on the internet. I'm John Perry. With me is my colleague from Stanford, Ken Taylor.
And today we're asking about the psychology of partisan politics. We're joined now by Jonathan Haidt. He's a professor of ethical leadership at the NYU Stern School of Business. He's author of The Righteous Mind, Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion. Jonathan, welcome to Philosophy Talk.
Thanks very much, Ken. Thanks, John.
Jonathan, you've written a lot about all sorts of issues in social psychology, a lot of really important stuff on positive psychology and on the nature of human happiness. Now, those are uplifting topics. What led you from them to the psychology of partisan politics, which seems pretty depressing?
Well, what I study is morality. I've been fascinated by it since I was a kid. I was always a very moralistic kid. I was a philosophy major as an undergraduate. And when I went to graduate school in psychology, I studied morality, which is kind of like the operating system of our social life. It's all around us, and it controls what we do. And I started studying it. I then focused on the moral emotions because everyone in social psychology and developmental psychology, they were looking at reasoning, at the development of kids' moral reasoning. And that just struck me as kind of, the tail, not the dog. So I was looking at emotions, moral emotions, and I started studying some positive moral emotions, like the feeling you get when you see someone do something heroic or generous. So I did some research on moral elevation, and that got me into positive psychology. But my real love was always understanding how morality varies across cultures. And I was working away happily, looking at morality in India and the U.S., when the Democrats lost the 2000 election. And it seemed to me that Al Gore just had no idea how to talk in ways that could connect with American morality. But, partisan liberal that I was back then, we all thought that, the Republicans didn't really win. And then in 2004, it looks like Bush really did win. And once again, Kerry seemed to have no idea how to connect with American morality. So I got into the study of political psychology really as a kind of a cry of frustration, like, can't I grab these guys by the throat and say, listen to me, here's what you need to know. And I started doing research on it. And in the course of doing the research and really trying to understand conservatives, I kind of came to see that, there are partisans who are crazy on both ends. But for the most part, each side sees threats. Each side sees truths that the other is blind to. And I ended up dropping my partisanship and really just trying to understand what each side can contribute.
Well, as a philosopher, I would like to see politics as a rational sphere in which people deliberate together about mutual interests and try to solve conflicts by rational persuasion votes. Sounds like you've talked yourself out of that perspective. Is it just hopelessly naive?
Yeah, I'd say it's hopelessly naive. I mean, you probably want to see health behavior as something we do by weighing up costs and benefits. That's just something about you there, John, that philosophers love to see reason everywhere. So the basic thing that I think psychology can contribute is let's get a clear grasp on human nature. The problem is that human beings can't be very rational as individuals, but if you put us together in the right way, then you actually can get rationality as an emergent product of the system.
You put us together in the right way. You put us together as we are in a democracy where one person, one vote, and you get that vituperation that we just heard on our roving philosophical report. Seems like we're together in a good way, but it's a mess.
Oh no, good. Hey, wait a second. I thought you philosophers use words carefully. We're together in a good way. Yeah, we're together. I never said anything about endorsing the present arrangement of us in a system with so much money, with partisan media. No, there are a lot of problems with the way we're put together. And in America in particular, our democracy really has some serious flaws that many of which we can correct, and I hope we'll get to that later on in the show.
Well, it sounds like your liberal heart hasn't quit beating altogether.
No, you're not the first to observe that. You can't really change you can sort of put an overcoat on and not really change your spots underneath, perhaps. Yes, my liberal heart. But in terms of the philosophical positions I hold and the kind of society I'd like to see, while I have nothing good to say about the Republican Party, I must say the greatest wisdom, the best things I've read in the last few years have been sort of center-right, going all the way back to Edmund Burke.
You're listening to Philosophy Talk. Today we're asking about the psychology of political partisanship.
In our next segment, we're going to dig deeper into the psychology of the partisan mind. Do you have a thought on why left and right can't seem to work together these days?
Morality, psychology, and political divisions. When Philosophy Talk continues.
The one on the right was on the left, and the one in the middle was on the right, and the one on the left was in the middle, and the guy in the rear was a Methodist.
If partisan politics can destroy a folk music group, what hope is there for the rest of us? I'm John Perry. This is Philosophy Talk, the program that questions everything.
Except your intelligence. I'm Ken Taylor, and we are questioning the psychology of partisan politics.
Our guest is Jonathan Haidt. He writes really readable, good books, including The Righteous Mind, Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion.
So, Jonathan, let's get your title, Why Good People Are Divided. Well, we grant that they are divided. They're divided by politics, by religion, and all that sort of stuff. But you've got an answer to why. So let's start to dig into your answer to why are we so deeply divided?
Well, I think it helps to start by lowering our expectations. I'm a social scientist, and to me, the question of how we're able to cooperate with strangers, with people who are not our kin, that's the greatest mystery of life on Earth. I mean, there's lots of organisms on Earth, and almost none of them can really cooperate and do anything big unless they're siblings, like the bees and the ants and the wasps. And then about 10,000 years ago, we start getting the rise of you get agriculture. And then just a few thousand years later, you get cities and nation states and democracy and commerce. And it's really miraculous that we can do this at all. And the story that I tell in the book is that one of our big breakthroughs was our ability to come together in teams that circle around sacred objects, originally gods, but now it can be principles as well. So the very thing that makes it possible for us to work together in teams makes it pretty certain that these teams are going to compete with each other.
Wait. So, okay, I grant you that the human social life, cooperative arrangements are really huge and consequential, and that we do something. I mean, there are some of our progenitors, the primates, cooperate. Ants and bees cooperate. A little, right. But not, apes will spend all day grooming each other.
Well, that's right. Dyads, they can cooperate in dyads.
Right, exactly. But this huge kind of social thing, I grant you, that's a distinctive human thing. You said something surprising, though, that this distinctive human thing, this capacity for wide-scale cooperation among non-kin, especially, right? Also leads to competition and division. Explain why that's so.
Sure. So the basic evolutionary process that makes all of this possible is called multi-level selection. So everybody's familiar with the idea that an individual is competing with others, and the one that has the longest neck or gets the most mates or whatever it is, the individual that has the traits that win has more offspring. That's easy. But there are some places out in the natural world, not a lot, but there's some places in which groups that can be cohesive can conquer groups that aren't. And so you see a little bit of this among chimpanzees. They do sometimes raid their neighbors, and if they can kill the males and take the females, they win, and they win the territory. So you get a little of that, which suggests that our primate ancestors weren't just selected for who could beat out their neighbor, but who can come together in a group to beat out the neighboring team. And that's what Darwin thought happened. That's what Darwin thought was a big part of the evolution of our morality. And that's been forgotten in the 20th century.
So it sounds like you're saying, see if I got this right, it sounds like you're saying evolution designed human beings to be, as it were, team players, but it also designed there to be multiple human teams, and it designed the human teams to kind of constantly war with each other, constantly compete with each other.
Well, that's right. Why else is it so important to be cooperative? Is if you've got external threats and competitors. So we cooperate best when we're competitive. And that's what's so wonderful and thrilling and pleasurable about sports. And about politics, frankly. It's really fun to be on a team, to fight what you think is the good fight. You demonize the other side. Now, in sports, it's usually playful demonization, and you're usually happy to go out for a drink with them afterwards. But sometimes there, too, it can turn into a real grudge match, and you want to break their heads.
Well, it's good that you've got the cup is half full attitude towards social cooperation. Having lived through most of the 20th century, I need to be reminded of that sometimes. But can't we aim even higher for politics than seeing an analogy with sports? I like to cheer for the 49ers, But I don't really enjoy what's going on in Washington, even when my team seems to be winning. It's just depressing. I mean, I'm not.
Well, that's right.
I wouldn't vote
Washington
to do away
is,
with the NFL, but I would vote to do away with the current mess in Washington.
Well, that's right. And if there was a competitive system, and if bad Congresses were replaced by more effective Congresses, we wouldn't be having this problem. But that's not the situation. Congress is not like the NFL. It's like British soccer hooliganism. It's a really sick sport, and it's become really sick only in the last 20 years. A lot has changed since the 90s, and that really is where we have to go back to for the tale of our sad tale of woe.
Okay, but I still want to dig deeper, Jonathan. I mean, I get your point, and I'm not yet either convinced or unconvinced. I just want to probe a little bit more, okay? Because, we're divided into teams. But you know what? There's an American team versus, say, the old Soviet team or the Chinese. We've got these really large teams now. But in some sense, America is not like a single team, right? I mean, what prevents us? So humans divide themselves into teams. I get that. But what prevents us in, say, the American political context from forming the one large team, the team of we Americans?
Well, when there really is an existential threat to the nation, and especially if it's a foreign army or a nation that is attacking us, that's the primordial trigger for us to all come together. And so part of our situation now is that we went from the greatest generation, people like John who said, and John, people are older than John, who remember the Second World War. There's new research showing that if you experienced war in your nation when you were in your teens, you are more cooperative and trusting for the rest of your life with people on your side. You're more generous. You're a better citizen, frankly. So we go from the greatest generation. They remember the war. Yep, they were all that one American team.
Yeah, but but still, take abortion or take homosexuality or any of these or gun control. Why? Give me some insight into why we can't form a cohesive team about those issues.
Well, let me add a little bit, but let me add a little bit before you answer.
Who's the external end? Okay, sure.
So, I mean, you're talking to two academics, and we're on public radio. So one suspects there's a lot of latte-drinking liberals involved in this conversation.
Yes.
And when us guys read your book, we're kind of surprised at all the nice things you say about conservatives. And in fact, you say they're kind of morally more advanced than liberals in some ways. So in answering Ken's question, can you kind of push your ideas about that forward a little bit?
Sure. So let's start with what are some of the psychological differences between liberals and conservatives. I would never say that one side is more advanced than the other. The long history of humanity over the last few thousand years has been declining tribalism, increasing peace. The 20th century was actually the century in which the fewest people were killed as a percentage of the population. I mean, this is Steve Pinker's recent book. Violence goes down and down and down. And a lot of that is because of liberal institutions. I just mean liberal in the historical sense of liberal. So the long trajectory is actually towards increasing peace and decreasing tribalism, and that's all great. America's taken a kind of a detour, unfortunately, in recent years. As for the psychological differences, a lot of research is converging on the idea, or the finding, that conservatives are people whose brains are a little more sensitive to threat, or you could say liberals are people who don't notice threats when they're really there. So even if you just make a loud burst of noise, conservative brains will react with more of a startled response. There are some very slight personality differences like this, and they're heritable. Identical twins separated at birth, when they grow up, they'll probably be in the same political party because our temperament makes us attracted to certain kinds of arguments and not others. And one of the big differences is in terms of what each team ends up holding sacred. Liberal morality tends to focus more on suffering, oppression, harm, compassion, empathy. They tend to put victims at the center, especially whatever the victim du jour is. So it was African Americans a while ago, and women, now it's gay people. And so each group binds and blinds. Each group circles around its most sacred value. And then it demonizes the other. It says, oh, those conservatives, they're racist. The conservatives, in contrast, are more likely to valorize family, religion, nation, which is not government. They don't sacralize the federal government, which they see as too liberal.
Are conservatives more likely to see those things, those folks that liberals see as victims and so deserving of some kind of uplift, as some kind of threat? So see those folks as, deserving warding off or something like that? Is that too simple?
Well, there are some cases in which that's true, yes. So a lot of this goes back to what you call the new left in the 60s. So, as I was saying, the greatest generation saw the world in a certain way, and the American team versus the other team. But in the 60s, the baby boom generation, for them, the division was right versus left, and it was a culture war. It was a real change from my grandparents' generation, which was about labor versus management and socialism, things like that. Once feminism, abortion, race issues, once those became the central issues, then society divided over what was fair, who needs to be helped, and what's the role of the federal government in doing that. So your opening piece about fairness. Let's look at welfare. Well, is it fair that we should give money to people who have less? Is that what fair is, to make them more equal? Or is it fair that people who don't work, who have kids out of wedlock and keep having more and more kids, is it fair that everybody else has to pay for those kids when the fathers just skip off and don't meet their responsibilities? It's not obvious what the right answer is.
I agree with you. It's not obvious. Let's see what our listeners think. Carolyn from Berkeley's on the line. Welcome to Philosophy Talk, Carolyn.
Hi, thank you for taking my call.
What's your comment or question?
I'm wondering whether this problem of the psychology of partisan politics is just from an American phenomenon. So I'm from Germany, and in Germany it seems like we don't just have a partisan division along one dimension. We have a Green Party, we have a Free Market Party, we have a Social Democrat Party, a Conservative Party, we even have a Socialist Party, and it doesn't just break down into two camps. So I'm wondering, is this an issue that is somehow brought about by something that is peculiar about America?
Good question, Carolyn.
Great question. So the underlying psychology, the psychology of left versus right, appears to be universal, but how do you translate from people's minds to the actual political parties? Well, that's a long process in which history and political institutions have a lot to say. So there are some other countries, like in Israel, where the left-right divide is even worse than it is here, and it's very similar, with the religious conservatives versus the secular atheists. So it's not unique to America. But America has an unfortunate, we have a two-party system. The founders did not intend there to be parties, but because of the nature of our political institutions, we have a duopoly, and there can be no third party. The obstacles that the two parties erect are so great. When citizens-elect tried to put a third party on the ballot, they failed. The laws were just too steep. So America has some unique problems.
Jonathan, I want to press you on this point because it always has struck me that it used to be in the 60s, people would say the Democratic Party is not a party. I can't remember what the phrase was. It was just a conglomeration, a loose conglomeration, and that there was no real core that would hold all these folks together, right? Especially as the Democratic Party started to fracture and the new Democrats were a way of recapturing some kind of coherent narrative that would group a lot of people together. It seems to me that the Republican Party these days, you've got, I'm going to talk in kind of dismissive terms, you've got global internationalists who believe that the market is God. You've got fundamentalists who some people would think miss the Enlightenment, right? Who believe that we should have a theocratic state. You have libertarians who believe get the government out of my bedroom. You've got people who are xenophobic who want to send all the immigrants back and blah blah blah. And don't want to live in the gated, walled-off communities away from the other. They want their country back. How does that party psychologically count as one thing?
Oh, parties are always conglomerations of interest groups. What's interesting, what's happened to America, is that the parties used to always be conglomerations of, say, Southern farmers and Northern ethnic folks or whatever it was. They were always conglomerations of interests. And what happened in the 60s is that they became much more a psychological split, so that all the people with the liberal temperament, just about all of them, they end up in the Democratic Party. All the people with the conservative temperament end up in the Republican Party. And that defines the central axis, the social liberals versus the social conservatives. Now, there are a lot of other people out there that don't fit right on that dimension. Where do they go? The most interesting case these days is the libertarians. My research group at yourmorals.org has a very large study, about 14,000 libertarians and 100,000 others. What we find is that libertarian personality is actually more like liberals. They're very high on openness to experience. They're very highly educated. They're very secular. But even though they're more like liberals, they hate the liberal welfare state for philosophical reasons. So their only chance, their only hope is to side with the Republicans. So yeah, politics makes strange bedfellows on both sides of the divide. But yeah, I'm not saying parties are psychologically coherent. I'm saying there are some groups of people, and those are the ones that drive the left-right divide right now.
So I'm going to ask you a sort of a practical political engineering question. When I was a young kid, France was in disarray with, government after government, seldom lasting more than 6 weeks until de Gaulle took over. So we were all taught, well, that's the weakness of the parliamentary system. We're so lucky that we don't have that here. But since then, the evidence seems to me on the whole the other way. Parliamentary systems seem much better able to deal with the really diversity of views and the multidimensional nature of political views that are out there. Do you think the parliamentary system would be psychologically more realistic than what we have here?
Well, so it depends on other local conditions, and here's the main local condition that we've lost. It's a sense of common identity, ability to talk and trust each other. So let's look at the point of the founders' design was to pit groups against groups, to pit branches of government against branches of government. And that can all work if you don't need a lot of vigorous legislation, if it's okay to have delay and blocking, and if you have a political class that can do what politicians have always done, which is they've got very strong people skills. They can cajole, bargain, persuade, they go out to dinner, they flatter each other's wives, all sorts of stuff. So that's the way politics has always been. And the big change, the big thing we've lost that has brought us to a standstill is that in the 1990s, Newt Gingrich, it's not only his fault. I mean, he was responding to the fact that when the Democrats were in the majority, they were not kind to the Republicans. But when Gingrich and his Republicans took over in 95, they made so many changes to the nature of Congress. One of the worst being he changed the schedule so that all business is conducted midweek. And now they don't live in Washington anymore. They don't know each other. They fly in on Tuesday morning, fly out on Thursday afternoon. They all say the same thing. I came here to try to get things done, but we can't get anything done. And I never meet the guys on the other side. I don't know them. So it's like Jonathan, a complicated machine. Yeah.
I want to ask you a question before we go to a break. So look, there's all these differences, but are we committed to, do you think we're at all committed to trying to resolve our differences by shared modes of reasoning and persuasion that, we all endorse as, rational or something? Are we at all committed to sort of common discourse? That's what philosophy wants. It wants us a common mode of discourse that we can all use to adjudicate our differences.
So if you're going to put your money there, then I would say, yeah, you're naive. But look, I'm a social psychologist. I would say start with the relationships. If you get the underlying relationships right, then you can reason together. It's naive to think that if we just take people who differ, bring them together and talk out their differences, that something good's going to happen. This has been tried. It was called, you can Google a paper, What Happened on Deliberation Day. What happens? People show up, they say their thing, they don't even listen to what the other person says, they come away more sure than ever that they were right.
Gosh, that's a depressing
reasoning depends. Yeah, reasoning depends on emotions and relationships. And look at the way the Plato's dialogues work. They're sitting around drinking, they're eating, they know each other. Then you can reason together. And that's what we don't do anymore in this country.
You're listening to Philosophy Talk. We're talking about the psychology of partisan politics.
Is American politics doomed? Will we ever be able to bridge the partisan divide?
The future of politics, when Philosophy Talk continues.
I'm opposed to it. On general principles, I'm opposed to it. He's opposed to it. In fact, he's opposed to it.
The partisan politics of Fredonia President Rufus T. Firefly. I'm John Perry. This is Philosophy Talk, the program that questions everything
except your intelligence. I'm Ken Taylor. Our guest is Jonathan Haidt, and we are questioning the psychology of partisan politics. And we've got a caller in the line, Kent in San Francisco. Welcome to Philosophy Talk, Ken. What's your comment or question?
Hello. Thank you for taking my call. My question is why it's so hard for liberals to promote policies that are more inclusive and serve to make more of a melting pot than a coagulating pot. And I'm thinking of things like affirmative action and the Violence Against Women Act. I'm kind of curious what's going to happen in the Ninth Circuit when two men are together in a domestic violence situation here. why it's not really talked
You think, so Ken, let me get you right. You think a Violence Against Women Act and affirmative action are divisive. Liberals would think they're more inclusive, but you think they're the opposite of inclusive. Is that right?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah. So, Jonathan, what do you think?
Yeah, I guess I'm not really sure I understand the premise. If the idea is that the caller thinks there's some benefit to having a melting pot in which people lose their old ethnic identities and take on an American identity, then I would agree with that sentiment. I think multiculturalism has a lot of problems. If our problem is in America is that we don't have this sense of identity that allows us to trust each other, well, the more you emphasize people's separate identities, the more divided the country is, the less people are willing to pay to support others.
Well, think about it this way, though. Look, so affirmative action is originally as a cure to a deep and pervasive social ill, the refusal of white Americans to recognize the full humanity of black Americans. And that's not like something that just went away when slavery went away, because then the South conspired to have Jim Crow, and when the court said you can't have separate but equal, they still tried to find ways to not, and so there's a kind of defensiveness. Black Americans and liberals see a kind of defensiveness in the dismissal of affirmative action. It's just another divisiveness. It's a kind I want that. I want my white privilege, and you know what I want? I want you to just be another one of me. I don't want to recognize your distinctiveness, right? That's how a liberal would see the reaction to affirmative action as some kind of racial spoil system. So, and the conservative would obviously see it differently. Now, my question to you is there any way that these people can talk to each other?
Well, again, up front, no. If you just bring people together to talk, no, there is no way. But if we were to have the kind of discussion that I think we really need to have in this country about affirmative action, what's the purpose of it, in which liberals are concerned primarily about inequality. Inequality is rising. Liberals are right to be worried. And since the class gap in achievement long ago surpassed the race gap has been shrinking, the class gap has been rising, the idea that we have affirmative action based on race and not class it's very hard to justify that in moral terms here in 2013. And so I think we could have a discussion about who really, what should the policy be? It shouldn't just be blindly based on race. The children of rich black lawyers, as Obama said, when my kids go to college, I don't think they'll need extra help.
So just to put it in historical perspective, when affirmative action began, it was mostly affirmative action to get the pool, at least in the universities, to get the pool of applicants richer.
That's right, and it worked.
And that worked well. It would be an interesting book, The History of Affirmative Action. Now, I hate to keep sounding like an old codger, although I am an old codger, but during the Vietnam War, my father and I really had divergent views. But we talked to each other because we had a lot in common. We had to watch Walter Cronkite because there was nobody else to watch except Huntley and Brinkley, which was the same stuff. We read different newspapers, but it was mostly the Associated Press. Nowadays, it's so different. He would be watching Fox. Right. I would be watching MSNBC. I would be going on the Internet and reading blogs by my friends, other liberals and academics, and he would be reading blogs by people that like to listen to Rush Limbaugh. Has the Internet and cable TV made the situation even more hopeless than it already was?
Yes, it has. But the way to think about it is this. The mid-20th century was a temporary period of extremely low divisiveness because of going through World War II and then the Cold War, because the media was unusually cohesive, as you said. I mean, if you go back to the founding days, all the newspapers were partisan newspapers that were full of lies. So we have this brief period in the 20th century when things were amazingly good and Congress could do big things in a bipartisan way. So that was doomed to end. That couldn't last. But it's gotten so much worse in the last 20 years, and the media is a part of that. We can definitely roll back the clock, I'd say, to the early 90s, perhaps.
Keith in San Francisco is on the line. Welcome to Philosophy Talk, Keith.
Thank you. My question for Jonathan is this. Is the strong psychological trigger the underlying belief, or is it more likely the words which are used? And I'll elaborate on that. Let's say I go out and I read your book, and I think this is a great idea to promote my particular worldview.
Right.
So let's say I'm a liberal, and I want to appeal to conservatives with a very liberal program, so I use words like family, religion, and nation, or I'm a conservative, and I want to appeal to liberals, so I do a very conservative program, utilizing the word suffering, empathy, and victim. Which seems to be valid? Is it the underlying belief, or is it how it is couched?
The people on the left seem to think that if they can just get the words right, they'll send this reframed message up into message space and it will lodge in conservative ears and change their minds, and that's not true. So a lot of people read George Lakoff. He's a wonderful cognitive linguist. He introduced the idea of framing to the left, but they read him too superficially. They didn't read him deeply enough. You can't just put the words out there because the messenger is much more important than the message. A great example, I've been reading up on the gay marriage victories in the 4 states that had statewide victories at the ballot box. And what they did, they avoided... They switched the terms. They stopped arguing about rights and deservingness. They didn't even show, if you look at the commercials, they didn't even show gay people. What they do is they trigger emotions. They show people witnessing. They say they have parents, conservative, Republican parents witnessing. It's moving. It's elevating. It opens your heart. And then they give you a simple reason, such as, I'm a Republican. I believe in freedom, and that means freedom for everyone. So that's the way to change hearts.
So wait a minute.
Change minds is open hearts.
I get you, but I don't know. I mean, hearts do change, but I'm not convinced they change so radically. And moreover, I mean, so look, this country is not as racist or homophobic or sexist as it once was. I grant that. I think the younger generations are coming up in a different way. But maybe you think I don't know. I still think underlying all of us, these primitive aversions. I mean, because we think we have this great cosmopolitan melting pot, but we don't. People still live largely separate lives. I mean, there's a lot of school segregation. I think in the end, people's hearts are not that changed from what they were in the bad old days. I mean, they are changed, but not radically changed. No.
Well, look, our genes haven't changed. Our brains have actually changed a little. We're getting smarter. The way we develop is with less violence. So even if our genes haven't changed, our brains are actually changing. Our political parties are changing. Our ideas about right and wrong are changing. So the general trajectory on violence, racism, and almost everything is really, really good. America now, as I said, is in a temporary reversal in terms of civility and political functionality. But look, society's changed. And how would you explain the victories at the ballot box for gay marriage?
No, I do agree that they're changing, but I think it's mostly the younger people change. I don't think people once developed change that much. I don't.
Not that much, but on a specific issue, they can change their mind. So the incredibly fast movement on gay marriage wasn't just because younger people are replacing older people at the voting booth. At every age, people are getting more accepting of it. And the reason is not because they were hit by philosophers and reasons. It's because they were hit by will and grace, and they were hit by suddenly they know gay people, and they know people who have gay children. And once it's normal.
Wait a minute. I want to challenge you on this. I think this is a good example. In your book, you say there's kind of 4 roots of morality: suffering, fairness, tradition, and sanctity, I guess. Do I have that
and
about
group
right?
loyalty is the 5th, yes.
Now, as a liberal, I think suffering and fairness are right in there, but I think tradition and sanctity tend to disappear in the face of facts and thoughtfulness. Now, will and grace and all that has changed our views about gay marriage. And you say that's not reason, but it is reason. It's a kind of reason. It's the kind of reason that when you're exposed to knowable things about the way people live, some of your feelings disappear. But the ones that don't disappear, the suffering and fairness, are the ones that the liberals are really adhering to. So isn't liberalism, all things considered, better?
And it's an advance. It's a moral advance.
Well, on the gay marriage issue, I think it's not the big issue is that disgust was toned down. There's a lot of research showing that if you make people disgusted, they're more harsh in their moral judgments. I've done this in a lot of ways. Actually, I did a study at Stanford. A student, Alex Jordan, sprayed fart spray into some empty trash cans.
I was wondering if you were willing
Stanford students.
I was wondering if you would be willing to say that on the air.
So fart spray, fart spray, fart spray. So, our emotions come first. As David Hume said, reason is not only to be the slave of the passions. So our reasoning is guided by the emotions that happened in the seconds prior. And as long as people were disgusted by homosexuality in the 90s, it was very hard to reason with them. But once the disgust goes away, they're open to reason. And if you then trigger elevation, moral elevation, you see these beautiful commercials. I mean, they really move you to tears. And then you're hit with a reason. Well, that's the way an intuitionist reasons. I'm an intuitionist. So it's not that reason's impossible. It's just that you got to understand psychology before you attempt, don't try this at home. You got to understand psychology before you reason with people.
We're getting into some deep philosophical issues. I would challenge you if we had more time, because I think that withering away of disgust is reason's response to the dignity of the other. But I'm sure you would disagree that that's reason's response. But that's an issue that we won't be able to get into. But I'll give you a chance for one last closing comment, Jonathan.
Closing comment would be the most important thing we can do is some simple fixes to our political institutions that'll get them to work a lot better. So if everybody would go out and join a group called NoLabels.org, their idea is, we need campaign finance reform, we need redistricting reform, but that's going to take 10 or 20 years to get. We got to act now. And there's some simple things that we can do tomorrow, like changing the legislative calendar, things that will allow congressmen to work together and build trust. So there are some things we can do about our institutions, and then there are things we can do ourselves about being a bit more morally humble and changing the way we look at our opponents. They're not as stupid and evil as our emotions make us think they are.
On that note, Jonathan, I'm going to thank you for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Ken. Thanks, John.
Our guest has been Jonathan Haidt. He's a professor of ethical leadership at the NYU Stern School of Business. He's author of The Righteous Mind, Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion. This conversation continues on our blog, theblog.philosophytalk.org, where our motto is Cogito Ergo Blogo. I think, therefore I blog. You can also follow our tweets on Twitter, and you can find out more by visiting our very, very active Facebook page.
And don't forget this. You can sign up to get the free weekly podcast of Philosophy Talk at our website, philosophytalk.org. Now let's hear from our partisan of speed, Ian Scholes, the 60-second philosopher.
Ian Scholes. Politics has become very contentious over the past few years, but the media always find ways to calm us down and confuse us. They've been doing it for years. Remember when we went after Noriega, the leader of Panama? In 1989, we actually invaded Panama, and Noriega took shelter at the Holy See's embassy, claiming sanctuary. Now you might think Americans would be wondering if he's on the CIA payroll, why are we trying to capture him? Or if he's a major drug lord, like they say, why do we wait so long to try to capture him? These questions were lost in the media obsession with the papal nuncio. Most of us, I believe, had never even heard of a papal nuncio before Noriega went to hide with one. But we forgot all about Noriega and started following the nuncio around. Why? It's not like he was Elvis. He was just another bishop. We barely even noticed when Noriega surrendered. And take the Bush v. Gore presidential race. What did the media spring on us to take our attention away from the blood feud? Chad. Did the Chad dangle? Did it not dangle? That became the burning issue. Now, in the ongoing life and death struggle between the forces of Obama and the forces of the Tea Party, the budget debate first centered around what was called the fiscal cliff. Now, that sounded pretty ominous. Tea Party was headed right for that sucker. Suddenly, however, the fiscal cliff has been replaced by the word sequester. It's been a while since I've had the occasion to use the word sequester. Come to think of it, I don't know if I've ever had the occasion to use the word sequester. I always thought it was a verb applied to artists who hide from the public in order to finish a magnificent painting, kind of like a quarantine, only self-imposed. Also, juries are sequestered until they come up with a verdict or a magnificent painting. How did that verb become the noun sequester, which seems to mean budget cuts pulled more or less at random from a previously owned top hat? I don't know. It's not quite the same as sequestration, which is the act of seizing assets to pay off a debt. And there's some kind of insect sequestration as well, which aids in mating and avoidance of predators. All in all, though, sequester is one of those words like Chad or nuncio that pop up suddenly in the news, and nobody knows what the hell reporters are talking about, even though they act like we do. The sequester, as you hear this, will either have been avoided or has hit. I predict we won't know either way, except liberals will say it's a horrible thing that could have been avoided if conservatives weren't such ideological jerks, and conservatives will say that liberals are exaggerating the sequester to make them look bad. It's just a trivial amount of money, really, and besides, it's all Obama's fault anyway. So, let's all go broke calmly, and hopefully we will emerge from the sequester with a magnificent painting, or at the very least, a sculpture made of Chad. I gotta go.
The wisdom of the ages in a nutshell from Ian Scholes, the 60-second philosopher.
Philosophy Talk is a presentation of Ben Manila Productions and the trustees of Leland Stanford Junior University. Copyright 2013.
Our executive producer is David Demarest.
The program is produced by Devin Strolovich. Laura McGuire is our director of research.
Thanks also to Chris Hoff, Merle Kessler, Dave Millar, Jimmy Tobin, Tran, Carola Kreitmar, and Mark Stone.
Support for Philosophy Talk comes from the Templeton Foundation and also from various groups at Stanford University, the Friends of Philosophy Talk,
and the members of KALW San Francisco, where our program originates.
The views expressed or misexpressed on this program do not necessarily represent the opinions of Stanford University or of our other funders.
Not even when they're true and reasonable. The conversation continues on our website, philosophytalk.org.
I'm John Perry.
And I'm Ken Taylor. Thank you for listening.
And thank you for thinking.